The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
We didn't win this time, and that's alright. It doesn't mean that we won't still win this fight. And it's a little darker now, but that's alright. It makes it easier to gather up the light. So wipe your face dry, roll your sleeves up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up. I know it hurts so bad to be so close, to have your dreams seem to all go up in smoke. And I know you're scared now, I know you're tired, but keep your mind set on freedom and your eyes on the prize. So wipe your face dry, roll your sleeves up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up. I know it feels like this is the end, but if we stop hoping, we stop fighting, and that's how a tyrant wins. It's not a marathon, it's not a sprint, it's a 1,000-day relay race, so rest and resist again. Wipe your face dry, roll your sleeves up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up. We didn't come this far just to come this far when there's so much left to lose. We didn't come this far just to come this far when the future's ours to choose. We didn't come this far just to come this far and not get what we would do. We didn't come this far just to come this far, so put on your marching shoes. Wipe your face dry, roll your sleeves up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up. Wipe your face dry, roll your sleeves up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up. Wipe your face dry, roll your sleeves up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up. Even when they knock you down, you don't give up. You don't give up.
Again, we're so glad you're in your room. They're in the room today for our show, Resistance and Persistence, our stories, our voices, and our history. But this is the end of the month. It's the end of Women's History Month. So that means it's our national show too. So I am excited to start our power chat with Susan Wagner here today, MC, Boston in from New York. Welcome, Susan, into the power chat. And then bringing in Fennell Norton, our show messenger, who is, I know she's just as excited as I am to start today. How are you guys doing? And I want to start talking about something good.
Well, I tell you what, my first thing is, so I love this video because I have to talk about this. But what I think is so exciting is the very last sign that someone has up says spoiler alert. Now it says lost in the end. That's my favorite. So I just had to get that out because I love the song so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's the music made for the moment, and it is for the movement. And it's going to be, you know, when I get excited, we'll talk later about our great event coming up in June, the Women's Summit. This is going to be our anthem, sleeves up. And I kind of want our fists up, a little punching. And I'll have to say, Susan, I'm excited to talk about some New York business. And I just want to open up to give you a chance to say something about the song. And then I want to talk about PA.
Yeah. So I love that song, and I played it at an event with Congresswoman Grace Meng. And I don't know if anybody noticed her, but she was doing her sleeves up.
Yeah.
And she just thought it was unbelievable. So that was a lot of fun that she was one of the first people to hear it.
Was
And
that your group? Was that your postcard group in there?
no, Ashley was the congresswoman asked me to host an event in
Okay.
my apartment for leaders in sort of really women's issues. And Robbin had sent me the song that day, and I love the song so much. So I don't know if you noticed, but people going around in a circle, and
Yes.
I was filming it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad she has sleeves up and not something, kind of risque. So we were good at that. I saw somebody put in the chat, elbows up, elbows up. We're up. I love it, So I wanted to say, start with a little good news, because there's so much crap coming at us all the time, so much to talk about. But what we see is that this message of what this regime is doing is getting down to the people. And in the special election in Pennsylvania, those 3 flipped seats really mean a lot, that people are kind of waking up. We saw James Malone, the mayor of East Petersburg and Lancaster, defeat Commissioner Joe Parsons by just 482 votes. We'll take them. And it's so exciting. So they actually were able to hold the majority with the House seat that they flipped. And that was Dan Goner, as I pronounce his name, and he won. And this means they keep control. We love special elections in the sense Dems come out, we're good at this, but I do think it sends a signal. I don't know how you guys are feeling about that, but outperforming in a place that the regime guy won by 15 points in a red district.
Right. It was R15. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, before we get to, I was going to say, before we get to New York, I wanted to just throw in, Catherine, you and I had a chance to be on Demcast on Monday night, and we had a chance to listen to Gay Bellamont, who is running in Florida for Matt Gaetz's seat. And I know that people are like, oh, it's a long shot, it's a long shot. But we are sitting in a moment that people have never sat in before, and they are seeing what the Republican Party looks like, and it doesn't look like something that they want to keep in control. So she's actually looking pretty good right now. So I would just say for everyone to send really good vibes that way. If you can write postcards, if you can't do that, send some money. She is quite the inspiration. So don't let people tell us that something can't be done, because optimism is a strategy too, if you put something behind it.
Oh, right.
And the other candidate is supposedly doing even better. Weil, is that his? And I know people from our group were asked to send $25 to cover pizza, and so we all sent money to cover the pizza.
That's doable, right?
That was my point.
Very doable. I love that. Send money for pizza. I see that Chris Mathews has entered the room, and we're so excited to hear from her at the end. She's moved to Nashville now, been doing her arts and music down there. And I can't tell you, I saw her at a march in DC, and we're going to make sure we get her to the Women's Summit to sing this live for us, Sleeves Up. I want to say another thing about our sleeves up to get to work is so important when we're also talking about Virginia, and we have a great a great campaign, the Wake Up Virginia. And I kind of wanted to say that today to everybody I passed on my walk, wake up, right? Fennell, I don't know if you want to say a few words about.
Yeah, I do. I'll make them really quick. But yeah, we are really, it was so exciting that on Monday night, we talked about Wake Up Virginia, and people were so excited. They were like, we need this fire everywhere, because we really are excited. So we are having these giant billboards. They're bright red. They have a chainsaw coming through with Social Security and Medicare and veterans benefits. And it says, Wake Up Virginia. And the chainsaw's cutting through on these things that we should care about. We'll have postcards. We'll have text messages. We will also have barn signs. We'll have leaflets that we're going to go door to door. We are excited. And I think the point that we're trying to make is wake up, because we are ready to fight. And that's what I feel really good about.
And that's why we can't leave anything behind. I know that Florida, what we hear, it's usually what we're used to as grassroots people that I don't want to pick on anybody, but let me do it for a second. The party, well, we're only going to cover these 8 seats. Well, we covered 17 in Virginia, and we flipped 15. How about that? Florida, well, you know what? We're not going to win. But as Fennell and Susan always says, like, where we compete, we win. Our message gets out. Even if you don't win, it's a win. I mean, if you don't compete, it's a loss. And I think then you don't build the infrastructure, you don't talk to people, your party people on the ground don't feel like they matter. People need to feel like they matter. And when someone runs in a seat and there's something to do, regular folks, their rights, they're worried about their rights. And, you know, in Virginia, I could say none of us, and probably across the state really, because has not met somebody impacted by what this administration is doing to decimate our country. I mean, I know all of you, when I saw the guy, that news report with the measles on the train coming down to DC, I'm like, here it comes. Here
Yeah.
comes measles. And, you know, I have a nephew who has a liver transplant and he can't get a vaccine. So we're super worried about stuff like that. This is the crazy that's let loose, right?
Yeah, I just want to say this is why this moment is so important, and that's why I'm so excited when we're having this discussion today.
Right.
Because when women get involved in this, it is all kinds of women, and today we embrace everyone. So we have women of all kinds of backgrounds. When you put that together, it is pretty powerful, and that's why at the end of the day, sure, we'll listen to what everybody says, but we're going to do what we know needs to get done because we got this if we stick together.
Got our sleeves up. Well, let's get down to some show business, ladies. I think it's time. You know, I want to say to everybody new to the room, welcome. We have a new link. Hope you made it in. Those on the outside maybe waking up today and say, I didn't register. And then I know in the back, they're probably trying to register right now. But always when we get a new link, it's a new Fridays, we say. But you are on Network Nova's Live Friday Power Lunch. It's March 28th. And welcome into the room. You have a wonderful host here that are going to bring you the guests, the information. We like to make politics fun. We like to say naughty words because we're fighting, and you just have to have fun and make sure that we take care of ourselves every day. We're a supportive community, but if you're in the chat being nasty, we'll kick your butt out, no problems. And our patrons, welcome. Oh, thank you, patrons in the room for supporting our show. That monthly money really is so important to our work. And I want to say that thank you to, is it Michelle Ward? Robbin, I'm going to mess it up. Yes, Michelle Ward, our newest patron. Thank you. Also, Kind Karen, Marguerite Mars, Colette Krinnock, Lisa Hinostraza, Barbara Lowry, Carrie Kilbum, Barbara Best. And Michelle Ward, thank you again for being a backer. Want to join that team? It's a great member of great people supporting it, and you get special perks with that every week. And also, this is our last show for Women's History. The resistance, persistence, our stories, our voices, our history. Like today's lineup, we're going to talk to Chris Mathews at the end of the show. We're going to do our sleeves up again, and we have some great ideas for our Women's Summit to make sure you buy a ticket. We have an author here, the author Clara Bingham, journalist and best-selling author. Fennell is super excited, right, Fennell? She has her book. Look at her. She probably slept with it on her pillow. We also have Susan. We have this Persisterhood Project Team here. Susan, right? This is part of you. You're part of that, but you're also emceeing today. So thank you for being here. I want to say a special welcome to Bonnie Stabile. Bonnie is the founder and director of Gender and Policy at George Mason University. And Amanda Menjivar is here, and she is the Manuscripts and Archives Librarian at George Mason University. That's where I got my master's too. All the smart people go to George Mason, Bonnie and Amanda. All right, Robbin Warner's here, Persisterhood Project, and Martha Merson. Is Martha also part of Markers?
No, but she's part of the Grassroots Connector.
That's right. Okay, I didn't know if she was also on your team. All right, so we want to make sure we get things started. With that, you know, I think we would like to transition to our first guest, if that is something everybody wants to do.
We do want to do it. I am so excited. Everybody knows it because I've been continuously talking about it, that I'm going to have a chance to talk to author and journalist Clara Bingham. And we're going to talk about her new book, The Movement. And so if you guys will bring Clara up, she can finally see what my first question is going to be, because I'm so excited. Hi, Clara. How are you today?
Hi, Fennell. Thank you so much for having me. What an exciting big group of activists you have today.
It really is. And I have to tell you, I've been talking about this book all week long and telling everybody, you have to get it. You have to have it. There is so much here. Now, believe it or not, when I get a book, the first thing I like to do is I read the forewords and I read what everybody else says about the book. And when I read this one in the beginning of the book, I sort of wanted to cry, but not because I was sad, but because I felt so hopeful and optimistic that even though we're where we are today, that I think we can get through. So I'm going to read this, and you may not remember it, but this is what someone said about your book. Bingham's sweeping oral history left me with such a powerful mixture of heartbreak and renewal and renewed resolve, an electrifying blueprint for how determined women can and do change the entire world. Now you see?
And that was probably written before the election, too. So
Yeah, but that's okay. We're still hopeful. We're still hopeful. This book goes on. It covers 1963 to 1973. So it goes from the Supreme Court's legalization of abortion all the way to from the beginning, starting with Betty Friedman's um, Feminine Mystique that she wrote in 1963. So you want to talk a little bit about that period from 1963 to 1973? And I also know maybe you'll tell us a little bit about the Feminine Mystique if people don't know what was actually in that book and the controversy that surrounded it.
sure thing. Well, I focused on this 10-year period because after lots of research, I realized it was during this decade that women, millions and millions of women, came together and created a nationwide movement in this country. And for the first time in recorded human history, they were able to lift women out of permanent second class citizenship, which is where we had been for centuries. And so it was this monumental moment in history, and it was really a perfect storm because it followed the civil rights movement in the South and the anti-war, anti-Vietnam War movement. Many of the women in this book and in this movement were part of those two movements. And so they developed amazing organizational skills and broke away from the sort of male dominated groups that they had been involved in and created their own amazing multi-racial, multi-generational, multi-geographic it was really a tidal wave of anger and persistence, and together they all changed the world for all of us. I mean, and I start with Betty Friedan
Mhm.
only because she wrote this book called The Feminine Mystique. It came out in 1963, so very, very early on. And she was a journalist and a writer, but mostly a housewife who lived in Westchester, New York. And she'd gone to Smith, graduated in the class of 1942. And it was her 15th reunion. So she decided to go around and interview people in her class and get a sense of what their lives were like. And what had happened since she graduated is the World War II had ended, and there was a massive kind of migration of middle class white people, couples moving out to the suburbs, leaving the cities, moving to the suburbs. And Madison Avenue had created the cult of domesticity. And because there was so much money and wealth from the war, these white middle class women were able to stay at home and be housewives and mothers, and they were supposed to be really happy about it. But Betty Friedan discovered that at least her classmates who were highly educated were not happy. She also noticed that since the war, women were in the 60s, they were backsliding.
Mhm.
She noticed that the average marriage age was 20, that 60% of women dropped out of college to get married, that the birth rates were skyrocketing. This was, of course, the creation of the baby boom. And also she looked at what was available to women in terms of work. And here were these, especially the Smithies, who were the smartest women in America, could either be secretaries, they could work in a store, they could be a nurse or a teacher, they could be an airline stewardess. and in which case they would have to stop. They would get fired at age 32 because they were too old, or of course, if they got married or pregnant, they would get fired. So would the nurses and the teachers if they got pregnant. And so she studied how really locked down women's rights were in the mid 60s. And when this book came out, it sold 3 million copies in the first year. So it touched on a chord. And still, 1963 was very early. There was no movement at all. But it sparked what later became a much bigger growing movement.
Yeah, it really did. I loved hearing about the story. It was interesting, all the controversy, and some of it certainly warranted, but that's what happens when you're growing. What also was interesting to me, though, was how women reacted to the book. That's when some of them decided that this was not going to be enough for them. So you want to talk a little bit about that transition where this is now the starting point where women are starting to say, maybe I want more than that.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I interviewed a lot of women of color who could not relate to the book at all. And so, because here it is, 1963, it is the height of the civil rights movement in the South. And Betty Friedan missed the entire race issue. So she, and also the women I talked to said, well, white women were sort of the enemy. They were our mother's employers. They had everything, they got to go to Smith. And here they were complaining, whereas so many women of color were going through what was called the double day, working often as domestics during the day, and then of course taking care of their families at the end of the day. So it looked pretty good to them to be a Betty Friedan and her group of cohort of middle-class women who were so well educated. I also talked to younger women who were much more radical, and they couldn't really relate to Betty either, but Betty's generation was often their mother's generation, and they watched their mothers, college educated, living in the suburbs, drinking too much white wine and miserable, very, very depressed. Betty Friedan called it the problem that has no name. And so they knew they didn't want to be like that either. So a lot of people were able to use this book as a sort of pushing off point into this sort of freedom that they needed for themselves. And in a way, that was what was so exciting about this movement was, of course, the motto was the personal is political. This movement took place in the boardroom. It took place in the bedroom. It took place on the factory floor. It took place in cities and towns all over the country. And by the mid to late 60s, women were starting consciousness raising groups, something they had learned about in the civil rights and the anti-war movement. And they were all getting together in, small groups, talking about their lives for the first time ever, just with women. And that had an incredible power. And it sort of, it spread this consciousness change, which was really important for women to suddenly realize, I don't have to fit into this box that has been created for me, and I can do something else. And it's also important for us now to understand how little women had at that time. Less than 1% of women were judges. Less than 4% were lawyers. Less than 6% were doctors. 95% of all gynecologists were men. Imagine that. So it really, women had very little political power. There were about 10 women in Congress out of 435. Now there are 151. So women had no political power, no financial power. They couldn't get credit cards. They couldn't get mortgages. Also, there was a lot of segregation, public segregation against women. There were plenty of restaurants and bars that barred women from entry. The United Airlines had a flight called the Executive that it flew from Chicago to New York between 1950 and 1973. No women were allowed to be on that flight unless they were, of course, beautiful and sexy stewardesses. So that just gives you a sense of how shut out of the world of power women were at that time.
There's an interesting little piece in the book that you put, because even when it came to women who finally made it and they were reporters, there were certain places that they weren't even allowed to go. They'd have to be on the balcony. And I think it was some Black women who were offended because one of the Black leaders was going to be at one of these events and they couldn't come down to the floor. They said, you have to be in the balcony. And I think it was Rustin who said, what's wrong with the balcony? And they said, what's wrong with the back of the bus?
Exactly. That was Pauli Murray,
Yes, it was
and
Pauli Murray.
during the March on Washington,
Yeah.
and the press conference was at the National Press Club, which of course didn't allow women, and so she of course, I consider she's probably, if we had to rank them, one of the greatest of all of the heroes of this movement and the legal architect of this movement. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg would later credit Pauli Murray, who was a legal scholar and a civil rights activist. She went to Howard Law School in the 40s, one of two women in her class. And of course, she graduated first in her class, but she was brilliant. But she faced extreme sexism at Howard Law School, and that shocked her because she hadn't expected it. She'd gone there to train to be a civil rights lawyer. She was from North Carolina and had experienced a huge amount of racism as a child, but not sexism. And here she was in a race neutral environment, being told that she shouldn't be taking a seat from a man, that she wasn't as smart as the men, that she didn't deserve, what they deserved. And that raised her consciousness as a feminist about 20 years before Betty Friedan turned up on the scene. But then she and Betty Friedan teamed up, and they started the National Organization for Women in 1966.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because there is this convergence of all women, because you had, suburban women, you had women who were not as wealthy, you had Black women, you had all these women, and at some point they have to come together. And so in your book, there is this point where they come together when they're thinking of forming the National Women's Political Caucus. So will you talk about that a little bit and that formation?
That was really a wonderful, important moment in 1971. And by then, the great Shirley Chisholm had been elected to Congress. She was elected in 1968, the first Black woman ever elected to Congress from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, right up the street from where I am now. And Bella Abzug, 2 years later in 1970, was elected from New York, from Manhattan. And the two of them were firebrands on Capitol Hill. And they, together with Gloria Steinem and Fannie Lou Hamer and a lot of union leaders, came together and started the National Women's Political Caucus. And the idea was, we need political power. We need to get women elected to office. And if they're not elected to office, we're not going to be able to change the laws. And if we can't change the laws, we're nowhere. So it was an amazingly important step forward for women, and it was also very diverse.
Yes, it was very diverse, and I loved it, and I wanted to talk about Bella because I thought that she was so amazing. I believe that Shirley Chisholm actually did the oath for Bella when she
Mhm.
came to Congress, and she was a firebrand because there's a story in there where the Speaker of the House, because there was a bill that she would bring up all the time because she was very, very concerned about women in this particular issue. And she'd bring it up all the time. And the Speaker of the House was, I guess, in the elevator. And he says to her, sorry that your bill didn't make it. And what did she say to him?
He said to her, better luck next time.
Uh-huh.
And
And
she
she said,
said, this is Carl Albert, the most powerful man on Capitol. And she said, fuck you. And her chief of staff, the great Esther Newberg, who was there at the time with her, said, oh no, there goes my parking space. in the
Yeah.
office building. We're really screwed. We have no more privileges. So that was how angry Bella was and how persistent she was. Also extremely anti-Vietnam War. I mean, she actually came into Congress on that platform and then became a feminist. So she was also every year she would introduce a end the war in Vietnam bill, which never got, more than 5 votes.
So this brings us to the question that we all wanted to know and talk about. This is amazing work. There are so many interviews. There are so many women here. There's no way that we could cover them all, but they're all so powerful and so important. So you decided to do this oral history. Why was it important to do that? Why was it important to do it this way?
Um, because the personal was political, I felt like this, of all revolutions in America, was the most personal. And therefore, the only way to really show it, to really tell this history, is through the voices of the people who lived it. The voices of the people who were on the front lines, who were on the sidewalk, who were in the conference rooms and changing history. And so this is the first oral history, by the way, as far as I can tell. And you can see all these books behind me. I tried to
Mhm.
read everything I could, and I couldn't find anything quite like it. And so I thought, first of all, I need to catch these women before their stories were lost to history. And I interviewed 120 of them who were between the ages of 75 and 95.
Mhm.
Um, and everyone had their own transformation. So it was both, they were radicalized usually by one or two things. It was then called the click moment,
Mhm.
when all of a sudden they would see the world in a different way. And their liberty mattered to them. And so many people were involved in the arts, were athletes, were healthcare workers. They were politicians. They tried to be lawyers. There were so many different kinds of women. The stewardesses were some of the first ones to bring lawsuits. The journalists at Newsweek were the first class action. Everyone was doing this, but all their stories are so different. And so to tell it as a straight history didn't, to me, feel authentic. And there's something authentic and also really emotionally palpable about hearing people's stories, hearing their abortion war stories, for example. I asked everyone I interviewed, did you have an illegal abortion? And what shocked me the most was it wasn't just yes, it was yes, I had 3 or 4.
Mm.
And so just understanding what it was like to live during this time and to be involved in this incredible evolution um, during this 10-year period was just so fascinating to hear. So I couldn't get enough of these stories. And of course, I couldn't put nearly enough in the book. I wanted it to be 2 or 3 volumes, but my publisher wouldn't allow it.
So one of the other things that I found fascinating here, and I was trying to find my page to see who said it, but you will know who said it. And I think it might have been Fannie Lou Hamer, but what they said is that all of these women together, coming from every background that you can imagine, that if we all stuck together, imagine the things that we could do. And so when you think about the moment that we're in now, how are you thinking about that based on what you've learned so far from all of these women?
I think it's exactly that. It's coming together, it's coalition building. That we have to now understand that we have a common enemy. All of us do, no matter where you're from, unless you are a Christian nationalist woman who lives in the South and loves Donald Trump. And there are plenty of women like that out there in America. If you are not, and if you are upset about our rights being severely curtailed, I mean, this is so heartbreaking to me, especially. I mean, I was writing one of the abortion chapters when Dobbs came down in June of 2022. And it was beyond heartbreaking, isn't even the word. I was just paralyzed with anger, to understand that for the first time in 50 years, our rights were severely curtailed. And so we have so much to fight against and so much work to do. And the only way to do that is by coalition building. And that's what Shirley Chisholm was a genius at. All her staff, everyone who worked on her campaign, they came from all parts of the Democratic Party. And she was really brave about supporting LGBTQ rights way before that was okay. And she supported the Black Panthers, and she supported NOW. And then, she was all over the map. And so only by being incredibly inclusive and understanding that we shouldn't fight each other. We need to not, the left is so good at eating their own, and we need to rise above whatever our differences are and focus on the task at hand, because it is very serious and it's a huge lift that we all have to do together. We have to rise together. And that was one of Pauli Murray's saying, and we have to rise together.
So this is why this is so important, because it gives us the playbook, exactly what we need to do, and it's done orally. So thank you so much, Clara. And Susan, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
So wipe your face dry, roll those sleeves up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up.
All right. Well, I'm going to pick up on some things that Catherine and Fennell were talking about. First of all, I know Clara because I know Heather Booth, and she introduced us. So talk about some great people who figure prominently in Clara's book. The second thing I want to pick up on is Catherine was talking about coming together as a community and having a platform, and women really being the ones to speak up. And I wanted to announce that the Grassroots Connector is actually going to be giving the grassroots a platform, because we don't have a platform in the podcast or the live stream. So we are launching something that is called It Needs to Be Said. And I think every woman on this, and maybe some of the men, understand that certain things need to be said. And this will be a platform for all of the people who want to be honest about what's going on and what needs to be done. And I have to say that right now, it's really the women who are rising up to really make a difference. So I hope all of you will listen to it and also partake, because we want to interview people who are the grassroots, who, what Clara just said, the personal is political. It's the people on the ground, and our voices have really not been heard, and now we will have an equal platform. So I hope you'll join us. The first event is going to be one of our heroes, Robert Hubble. He is certainly an advocate for the grassroots, is going to be our guest on April 10th. Okay, now I want to talk about the Persisterhood Project, which is a really natural segue from Clara. And every story has an origin story. So here's our origin story. I said to Robin Warner, one of the greats of the women's movement now, the current grassroots women's movement now, we have to have an oral history. We have to have what Clara was able to look at and speak to. We can get it done. We're not quite 95 yet, but we are certainly on the other side of the 50-yard line, most of us who have been involved in the movement. Not to say there aren't younger people, but many of us are on the other side of the 50-yard line. And so we decided that we wanted to have an archive of the oral history. And so we put together a team, and we spent a lot of time coming up with a name, which is Persisterhood. And I'm going to introduce each person on the team, and then I'm going to turn it over to them to talk about exactly what it is they're working on. I just want to say this. Everybody who's been on today has talked about community, sisterhood, hearing our voices. And that's what the Persisterhood Project is about. So I am hoping that every person who's on here would like to participate in some way in this project, because who knows, Clara might be writing another oral history book. based on what is the next movement. And I do believe this is the next movement. I just finished a book, The Icon and the Idealist, which was about birth control. So I look at that as sort of an oral history. Now we had your oral history, 63 to 73. And now we're going to have 2016 to 2024 and what we women were doing during that period of time, persisting and persisterhood. Okay, with that, let me introduce Bonnie Stabile, who is from Gender and Policy Center at George Mason University. And this is, Bonnie's been our advisor and our connector to George Mason. She's going to talk a little bit about the project. We also have Amanda Menjivar, who is the Manuscripts and Archives Librarian at George Mason. And I think this is the most fascinating part because none of us know about that. So we'll certainly learn a lot today. And then the great Robbin Warner, all of you who know her from Network Nova. And I'm going to tell you, she's going to give me credit, but she's really the brains behind the operation. And she is really the one who's keeping us focused and really taking us through. And she's a tremendous leader. And then Martha Merson, who is a member of the Grassroots Connector editorial board. She's actually, I consider her our chief editorial board chairman. And she is one of the most brilliant people I've met in this movement. She and I have worked together on a few projects, and I'm just thrilled that she's going to be part of this project, and hopefully many other people will join. So with that, Bonnie, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Susan. As you said, I was excited to get take part in this project. I met Robbin when I was on this very show a couple of years ago about talking about a book I had written. But in that capacity, so I, at the Schar School of Policy and Government, I founded and direct the Gender and Policy Center. And we give attention to women's leadership in the public sphere, policy outcomes for women, and talking about sisterhood and all of this, coalition building. We really wanted to be connected with as many groups, local and national, as we can, like Network Nova, like Ms. Magazine, like the Center for American Women in Politics, because we know that sort of when we're all working together, that we have a better chance for success. But one of the things we know, of course, is that women's voices are underrepresented, and a lot of times get lost in history. This morning, I was just out at the Turning Point Memorial in Occoquan. The Fairfax County Commission for Women and Girls had an event, and the keynote speaker was the educator Jessica Berg from Loudoun County, who is trying to get women's histories put more prominently into high school education. And, she talked about women, men are the curriculum and women are the elective in most of the education that kids get, especially before college. So she's trying to change that. And so she's just one of the many people who are working towards this. And certainly the Oral History Project, we do research on policy issues related to gender and more mainstream in our Gender and Policy Center. But I was thrilled to meet Robbin and talk about this Oral History Project, which does help advance the cause. And there was a natural fit for it where we are, so we can bring attention to these women whose histories might not otherwise be taken or preserved. And we, Jessica's talk this morning really made a big point of that. All these women's names that go unknown because they're not recorded in history. So we're pleased to be a part of the project, and we're fortunate to have a great team in our library, university library system at Mason, who are really partnering with us to help make sure that there's an institution, an educational institution in the Commonwealth of Virginia that will be the repository of this information. And we hope that's a great opportunity for the project, but is also for us as well, because we want to support. So yeah, that's our basic story, my part of the origin story. But I guess I don't know if you or I are passing to Amanda.
I'm just gonna call on Amanda, and Amanda's gonna inform us about an area that all of us are interested in, but probably don't have a tremendous amount of expertise. So go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Amanda. I'm so honored to be here today. This is like an amazing group of people. A lot of people know what a library is and what a librarian does, but not a lot of people know what an archives is or what an archivist does. So just a little crash course in that for you all. So I'm an archivist. I work in the Special Collections Research Center at George Mason University Libraries. I've been in the archival field for almost a decade. And I just want to say, like, I work for Mason, but these are my own views, my own personal opinions, but they inform my work there, of course. So what is an archives? It's kind of a difficult thing to boil down, but for our purposes today, we can call it records of continuing value. That's how archivists define archives. The records that we want to keep for as long as we can possibly keep them. And that has a lot of different implications, and it can be quite complicated. And it can also mean, the repository, the archival repository where these records are kept. And when I say records, literally anything can be a record. It's not just like a document. It can be photographs, it can be oral histories, like what we're talking about today. It can be objects, it can literally be anything, as long as it's a record of some kind of event, place, person, whatever, you name it. So in special collections, we call those collections, right? We have these collections of records that we keep in our repository on the Fairfax campus at George Mason University. And then when we talk about archives, we're also talking about the field and the people, right? And there are lots of different kinds of archivists who work in different kinds of organizations, different kinds of repositories. It could be a university like Mason. It could be a museum. It could be a local community archives. It could be a religious institution. It could be literally anything. So there's a lot of intersection there, and we like to sort of group ourselves into what we call the GLAM field, galleries, libraries, archives, museums. So there's a lot of intersection there. But yeah, I'm happy to clarify or answer any questions, but that's kind of where our role is. And something that, has been brought up today is, documenting the histories of people who have been marginalized, particularly women. And Robbin, I don't know, were you going to say something?
You go on.
Okay. And that's sort of probably the most important piece of this is like, whose record are we keeping and why? The historical record has been that of the victors, of the most important and powerful people in the world, white men. And so there has been a sort of sea change in the archival field in the last maybe 5 to 7 years to sort of the order of the day used to be archival neutrality. We're just the keepers of the records. We have no influence over them. That really is changing, and that's an important change. So now we're focusing on, who's been left out of the record, whose voices can we highlight in the record, and not get rid of what we've had, because that's important too, but just how can we fill these gaps, right? So that's what we want to do.
Thank you so much. Robbin, before I turn it over to you, the New York Times admitted that they had underrepresented women in obituaries. So now they've dug them out, and very often they'll just stick in an obituary for a woman who died in like the 40s, 1940s, because they're acknowledging that really they didn't cover that. So it's sort of very consistent with what you're saying. So Robbin is going to give us an overview of the project. She's not going to go into too many details, but she will be available to answer questions.
Well, thank you, Susan. It is so exciting to finally be here talking about the Persisterhood Project. As some of you may know, I took leave of absence from producing the Friday Power Lunch to get this project up and running, and we are almost there. We're officially launching in June at the Women's Summit, and if you haven't bought your ticket, get with it. But here among Friday Power Lunch, family and friends, we're giving you an exclusive preview of the Persisterhood Project. In this project, we're collecting and preserving our stories, our photos, our videos that document how we have tirelessly worked to protect and defend democracy in this difficult time. And yes, we're starting around 2016, and originally we were going to end at 2024, but come on, we are still going. So everything that's going on, we can't ignore that. Let me tell you how this is going to work. To begin, you're going to fill out a form that identifies who you are, who's conducting the interview, and so on. If you have photos and videos to upload, you'll get a special link. And there'll be a release you need to sign that will acknowledge your material is going into the George Mason University archive. Then you're going to get a link for a Zoom sign up. And by using our link, your interview will be recorded, a transcript will automatically be made, a summary, and all this will be saved without you having to do anything. We're working very hard to make this as simple as possible. And in doing these interviews, we're going to ask you to interview each other. Because we are all the foot soldiers, and we all know how to use Zoom right now. So you can interview each other, and we have a list of questions you can use, but we know having two activists talk, you'll be able to talk all on your own in doing it. But if you want to do it solo, you can do it solo as well. We chose George Mason University to be our archives because no matter what happens, this great institution will still be standing years after we've been gone. And that's important, that our stories stick around, for hundreds of years. And I want to add how delighted we are to work with the George Mason University Archive team. They're fabulous, and our stories are in good hands. When we launch at the Women's Summit, we will be unveiling our Persisterhood collection. Right now, our mission is to collect and preserve our stories. Once these interviews start getting collected and go into the archives, we're going to transition from being the Persisterhood Project to the Persisterhood Collection. And you will see that collection at the Women's Summit. And once that collection is up, we're going to turn our focus to promoting this collection. So authors, Clara Bingham, journalists, filmmakers, TV show producers, songwriters will all come listen to our tales and use them so that we will be invisible no more. And our history will be there to inspire future generations, just as all the stories that Clara was saying inspired us to do what we're doing. So now I'm going to pass it on to Martha, who's going to tell you how you can get involved in the project in this early stage. So get ready, because we want your sleeves up stories. Okay. Martha.
Hello, hello. So as you all know, I think Robbin and Susan Wagner are such powerful advocates for the grassroots community. Why did they even need me here? But I am involved sort of as a documenter and feel like this is something that is so central to who we are, is to hear each other's stories. So when I talk to somebody interviewing for the Grassroots Connector, I'm like, so tell me a little bit about how you got involved, what you do. And sometimes people are starting in the 1970s, right? Like I went to my first march, women's rights, reproductive rights. I was at the Supreme Court on such and such a day. I'm like, yes, we need to tell each other these stories. So as fabulous as Robbin and Susan are, they can't do this without us. They need us to help tell the stories, tell each other, write them down, document them, record them, upload them. So that's what we're going to be doing starting this summer. What will make it feel like it's successful? I think if we just have a profusion of stories that we get going this summer, a couple hundred, by the end of the calendar year, a few more hundred. This means that you can interview some of the people that you've never really been brave enough to ask in your group, like, what's your story or how did you get here? Gives you a little excuse, a cover. And you can submit the stories of people you know who are amazing activists in your family, in your neighborhood. So if you're on fire with this idea, you can submit more than one. And each of us, I think, should make sure that, we're represented in this. So reach out to somebody and ask if, even if you're feeling a little shy, like, could we do this, buddy? Could you be my buddy for this? So I wanted to encourage you to start thinking now, even if it's too early. We don't have all the forms up and ready. We don't have all the infrastructure to support you, but start thinking about, who are some of the people that I run across every time I show up at a community meeting, every time I show up at a rally, so-and-so's there. let's make sure to get this person's story recorded. So I wanted to give you, yeah, just a few seconds of thought time. And Robin, you're about to say something.
And I'm including our URL, our email, and the form if you'd like to volunteer in the chat.
And was that something you wanted to like show now, the form?
No, I'm gonna let Catherine's got some special things planned.
First of all, I'm freaking so excited about this project. And I really, as somebody with background in women's history, is that the first thing you learn is our history has been erased. And the most important thing we could do right now, I know people in the chat have been asking about, they're afraid it's going to get scrubbed. It's afraid it's going to disappear. So that's why this project's so important. I want to thank everybody doing this project. I'm so glad you'll be at the Women's Summit. And so what we're going to do right now, because we have Chris Mathews coming up to talk about music and how it also, secures those songs, is what we sing all the time. And that's another way we do oral history. But we want to talk about the Women's Summit and what we want to do. Well, after we interview Chris, we're going to play her song again. And during that song, what we hope to do is have a little contest to make sure we have a challenge that you all buy some tickets. And if you buy a ticket, you get some VIP during this segment, right, Robin? We get some VIP seating at the summit. We have some special that you can, I think we're going to do, our first person in gets the book, The Movement. The next two people get a t-shirt, and then whoever buys in this segment will be able to get to sit at the VIP table, especially when Chris will be singing it. So we hope you consider, we're going to drop that stuff in there. So, okay, for now, it's fantastic, but we want to make sure we get Chris Mathews up, right? And then we're gonna play her song. So Chris, I hope she's still on the line in the room with us. Chris Mathews.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, friend. But now, why don't you stick with us?
I was going to say, I'm not supposed to be here, but I'm starstruck.
You're like, what? Oh my gosh. I just want to say that that we had played your song Dancing In, and I'm going to play it for a second here. Let's see.
So wipe your face dry, roll those sleeves up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up.
So Chris, I want to ask you first, you wrote this song. Tell me that journey when this came to you about these words in this song.
This election, I woke up feeling so very different. I think because 2016 had been so deeply traumatic for me. At that time, I was living in Virginia in an interracial marriage. My former in-laws, their home is just a stone's throw from Charlottesville, where Nazis were already marching through the streets. And so the trauma of 2016 shaking out the way that it did, it made waking up this election feel like, we already did this. Like, we already know how to do this. We already did this. And so I found myself waking up very steeled and ready the day after this time around. And then, of course, hearing the vice president say, while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for our country is always worth it. And so hearing those words from her, it also reminded me of when I lived in DC, I had the chance to hear Christina Henderson speak one night. And she was talking about justice work, and she was talking about how this work, it is not a sprint, it is not a marathon, it is a relay race. And that's one of the things that, to their great credit, one of the things that the other side does so well is that they never lose sight of the long game. We have to begin to be much better at that. And that requires us to be able and willing to pass that baton off when we are exhausted, when we are overwhelmed, so that we can rest, so that we can fill our wells back up, so that we continue to stay in this fight, because that is what is necessary. And so all of those things were just kind of swirling around, and the song just poured right out. And my friend Seth Gleer, and another amazing singer-songwriter and producer, I played the song for him, and I asked him if he would be willing to produce it. And he said yes, and he had all these great ideas. He was like, and for the percussion, we're going to use bucket drums. This is like a song for the people. Like, we need bucket drums. I was like, we absolutely do.
Need some bucket drums. No cowbell. There was no cowbell, but there was bucket drums.
No cowbell.
Oh, Yeah, go ahead,
I
Fidel.
was just going to say, because I said it earlier today, that optimism really is a tactic as part of a strategy. And when I hear this song, sometimes I do just want to cry, but I also feel like I can get up and start punching. And I think at least I hope that's what you want us to do, is to know that we can get up and we can start punching and fighting.
Yes, absolutely. And the lyric in the third verse, it says, when we stop hoping, we stop fighting.
Yeah.
And that's how a tyrant wins. And that hope is such an integral part of this resistance. If we are not joyful, if we are not hopeful, what is it that we're fighting for? And so it is necessary to have that joy and that hope, so that you can continue to stay engaged, so that you can keep fighting. Those things are worth fighting for.
Yeah, and that it was great that we talk about today oral history and the movement of even protest songs and how these words, stay with us and how important. And for a writer and a social justice writer that you are, I mean, you really do carry those messages. They're so meaningful and so important, because you gave me, when I listened to this song, these words gave me, I mean, people couldn't find words after the election. You found them and you really did it. And so I want to talk about the importance of your work, the importance of just singer-songwriters. We think back in the protest movement. Talk about that, the social justice movement, and the importance of songs and why they're important to when we do this kind of work.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this powerful Dr. King quote where he talks about, he says, freedom songs are the soul of the movement. They are more than just clever incantations designed to invigorate a campaign. They are the sorrow songs, the shouts for joy. And so I think framing music that way, and I think recognizing historically the significance that music has had in pretty much every movement for justice, every movement for change in history. Music has always gone hand in hand, and I think it does that for a couple of reasons. I think one, it is a bit of a keeper of the history. We're kind of doing what Holly Near talks about as truth-telling journalism in our music and our songs, to be able to do that, to capture the essence of what is happening historically in these moments. That is one job. And the other job, I think, is very much to keep the people inspired and motivated and encouraged, so that they can get out there and do this very, very important and necessary work. And so I certainly try to keep those things in the forefront of my mind as I sit down to write these songs. I always hope that they will do either one of those things in a version of good in that way. And so I am happy to know that that song is doing that.
Yeah, and we want to play it, and as we kind of dance out today, and we're going to do our contest and challenge around the Women's Summit. But I wanted you to talk about your new album. One thing, when you're in Nashville, give you a chance to spotlight your work, and it's reclaiming. The album is reclaiming.
Reclamation. Yeah,
Thank
reclamation.
you. Yeah, talk about that album, and then what we're going to do. You're going to stick with us. We want to play the video, and then we're going to roll into the after chat, because there's going to be a lot of questions to all the people that were in the room today.
Absolutely. So reclamation, it's kind of a three-pronged reclamation. One, as a Black Southerner, it always just fascinates me that in genres like country and Americana and various roots music, Black people don't often have a seat at a table that we built. And so the reclaiming of that, the reclamation of our ability and need to be able to have space in that genre, to take up space in those genres, that is one part of the reclamation. For those of us who are also LGBTQ and women, to also be able to do that. And then, of course, because I am a preacher's kid and I am my mother's daughter through and through, the ability for those of us who are also LGBTQ to be able to take up space in spaces of faith. There's a song up there called Like Jesus Would, which, of course, in this moment where we're seeing the pervasive nature of Christian nationalism, being able to take that to task and call out the hypocrisy of that kind of full-throatedly. That song is a very important song on the album as well.
I mean, your music has spoke to us through this whole time in this movement, and there's a reason why our paths crossed. And so everybody in the room, make sure you check out Chris Mathews and her work, get it, her albums. And this particular song, Dennis, if you can get the sleeves up, ready to play. And the plan is going to be this. We are going to play the song, and as we end the show, okay? And we're going to hopefully people stay with us for the after chat, because the Persisterhood Project is going to be something. We have people have questions about how they could participate. Chris, that would mean you. I mean, anybody want to tell their story, get the hell in there and tell it. So that will be important. So, and then we will, I want to thank everybody for being here today. I'll do our show business before. Next week, we have Denver Riggleman on, who was the former congressman, author of The Breach, to talk about what the heck is going on with this latest intel stuff that we saw. This administration breaks some laws with Signal. We also have Lindley Thorne from Rural Ground Game, who we're going to see today and tonight. She'll be talking about what's going on and out in rural country with candidates and also campaigns. And lastly, we'll have on some folks, Mia and Maggie from the 5051 Virginia movement, because everybody, hands off. Everybody in here is going on April 5th to a hands-off thing. Chris, I hope you have something planned too. Everybody has been putting it in the chat, hands off. And yeah, we're going to fight. So let's make sure during this song, we sell some tickets to the Women's Summit. Get to see Chris Mathews. Well, I just already going to tell you, I emailed you about it. You and Heather, your wonderful partner, is in.
Okay, great.
Whether you like it or not, you're coming back home up here.
Perfect.
You're coming to the summit.
You're coming to the summit. So I don't know where Dennis, if you're going to cue that up. And then as we play, remember, first prize, book, second, couple t-shirts, and then all of you. VIP
table.
That's what, yeah, get to sit with us. No, not with me. Go ahead, roll. Let's go. And love y'all.
We didn't win this time, and that's all right.
Get your ticket. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we won't still win this fight. And it's a little darker now, but that's all right. It makes it easier to gather up the light. So wipe your face dry, roll your sleeves up. Even when they knock you down, you get back up, you don't give up. I know it hurts so bad to be so close, to have your dreams seem to all go up in smoke. And I know you're scared now, I know you're tired, but keep your mind set on freedom and your eyes on the prize. So wipe your face dry, roll your sleeves up.